Something in the fog. It was a beautiful afternoon on Sodor, and the sun began to set on the west side of the island. Some time had passed since the great rediscovery of Great Waterton, and all the engines had returned to their normal jobs. Percy was marshalling trucks in the yard near Elsbridge when the fat controller approached the saddle tank. Percy greeted him warmly.
"Hello, sir."
"Hello, Percy. I would like you to trial mail services to Great Waterton starting tonight." Percy was ecstatic. He liked to pull the mail train. It made him feel important.
"Yes, sir. You can count on me."
"That's a good engine. Now run along. You'll need plenty of coal and water for the journey." Percy hurried off to prepare for the evening ahead. As he refueled, he began excitedly chatting to Thomas and Toby.
"Oh, I can see it now, humming down the line with nothing but the moon and my lamp lighting my way. I don't get why he asked you to pull the train to Great Waterton. After all, I'm the one who discovered the town. Because the fat controller knows I'm just the engine for the job. You'd probably get lost, Thomas. Yeah, well, you'd probably crash into cots of lime before you even clear a mile."
Percy was about to remind Thomas of what happened after he hit a cart of lime before, but noticed Toby being suspiciously quiet. Normally he would at least chuckle at the sight of the two tank engines' arguments, but the old tram was never known to act like this. His face was pale, and his eyes looked sorrowfully down at his buffers.
Toby, are you okay?"
Toby, as if he'd snapped out of a trance, attempted to recompose himself. Yes, I'm fine. Just all this talk about the mail run to Great Waterton reminded me of... never mind. I'm just fine. I'm just fine. Both Percy and Thomas were now a bit concerned.
Toby, if something is up, then..."
But before Percy could finish, he heard the guard's whistle. "Come on, Percy. Time to go."
"Oh, right. Talk to you later."
Thomas stared at Toby.
"Toby, I've known you for decades. We both have. We know you're not fine."
"Well, let's just say there's a lot of unpleasant memories on that line." Percy rolled into the dockyard at Tidmouth to collect his special. The vans were being filled with letters and boxes. He backed down on them nice and gently. As Percy was being coupled up, he felt a chill race through his boiler. Percy shivered, but thought nothing of it. He was too excited to care. Reginald, the yard foreman, walked up to the green engine and addressed the driver and fireman. "Be careful tonight. There's word that fog has covered the north side." Percy's driver smiled. "We've handled worse, Reggie. Don't you worry." And with that, the guard blew his whistle, and Percy set off into the night, humming cheerfully. The moon shone bright as Percy puffed down the line with his mail trucks gliding behind him. He ran from Tidmouth to Knapford, then from Knapford to Elsbridge, and from Elsbridge all the way to Farquhar, dropping off packages at all of the smaller stations along the way. As Percy took the loop line to turn around, he felt another chill go down his boiler. He could have sworn he'd heard a sound in the distance. It sounded almost like Toby's bell, but Percy knew that couldn't be it. Toby was miles away, resting soundly in his shed. But if that was the case, what had he just heard? Percy was beginning to feel a little nervous, but he knew it must be his imagination. All the same, for the rest of the journey down the branch line, Percy kept a good lookout, just to be safe. Percy soon forgot all about the ringing as he turned back onto the main line. He dropped off the parcels at all of the main stations along the line until he came to the junction to head down the new route to Great Waterton. Percy felt his eyelids grow heavy as he strolled along. Countless wooden planks flew under his wheels at a hypnotic rate. A seemingly endless sea of trees could be seen for miles. The clatter of the mail vans almost sounded like a relaxing melody to the green saddle tank engine. The sweet smell of the guard's cup of cocoa was strangely appetizing to Percy, even if he couldn't actually ingest it. His warm fire made him feel much more comfortable. Despite Percy's best efforts, his eyes blinked slowly 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Percy awoke with a startle by the horrid noise. His wheels were still racing along the line. Percy figured he must have fallen asleep for some time, but while in service? That never happens.
Driver, how long was I out?
His driver didn't respond, nor did his fireman. Percy couldn't even feel their scruffy shoes in his cab. They were missing. Now that Percy thought about it, that wasn't the only thing that felt missing. Percy could no longer feel the mill vans yank on his coupling anymore. No longer could he smell the guard's cocoa. No longer could he feel... his fire? How could that be possible? There's no way he could travel this far, this fast without a fire. Percy was completely alone. He felt an urge to panic, to scream for help, but he knew that wouldn't work. Instead, Percy tried to get his bearings, but that's when he noticed it. The fog. There was something unnatural about it. For 6 feet in every direction, the fog was clear and Percy could see just fine, but beyond that was an impossibly dense wall of it. It circled around Percy, encased him, trapped him. Percy's lip quivered.
This can't be real, it can't!
Can it? Percy felt something slip into his smoke box, a feeling worse than anything he had ever felt. Percy felt colder than when James mistook him for Jack Frost. This was the chill of absolute terror. Percy could hear that ungodly bell ring once more in the distance. The saddle tank could only assume the bell and the voice belonged to the same individual.
Who goes there?
The figure didn't respond, but their bell continued to chime. Ring, 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 ring. Percy tried once more to get a response, this time slightly louder.
Who goes there?
Once more the figure didn't reply, but their bell grew louder. Ring, 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 ring. Percy's eye water and tears began to pour down his face, but as his terror reached a breaking point, Percy plucked up whatever small puff of courage he still had within his green metal body and blurted out, "Who goes there?" Percy blurred his whistle with a demanding tone, and with that, the ringing stopped. Percy was astonished that that had actually worked. He suddenly noticed his brakes apply without him doing so. Slowly but surely, the green engine came to a halt, still surrounded by fog. Percy looked at the rails in front of him. Just 5 feet ahead of him was a gorge where a bridge had once stood. The fall undoubtedly would have killed the green saddle tank. While trying to get his bearings, Percy looked over to the other side of the collapsed bridge. He could see what looked like a tram engine. Their expression looked both angry, sorrowful, and fully in acceptance all at the same time. The engine's wood was covered in mud and moss. It was clear no one had maintained this engine in decades, but one thing was quite visible. A single number on the engine's buffer beam. Number 6. The engine's eyes locked with Percy's. Neither exchanged words. Neither made a sound. Neither dared look away. It remained like this for a full 10 seconds. Then, the sound of splintering wood could be heard, but was quickly muffled out with inhuman screams of agony coming from the tram. Percy was shocked, but he thought desperately of anything he could do to help this tram. But there was nothing. Percy tried to cry out, to give words of comfort, to express anything, but he couldn't muster the sound. The tram simply continued to scream out in pain as the splintering got louder, and louder, and louder. Their eyes rolled into the back of their faces with one final crack. The face split in two and the doors on the front of the engine split open. The once living tram simply sat there for 3 seconds before its brakes gave way. Whether by accident or by intention was unclear, but the tram began to roll towards the edge before suddenly flipping off the bridge. It fell into the gorge below, most certainly about to collide with the rocks, but just before the impact, everything went dark. Percy opened his eyes. He was on the branch line once more. His driver and fireman were back, as was the mail train, and the guard with his cocoa in the brick van. It was as if nothing had happened. Everything was as it should be. Everything was peaceful. But as Percy continued down the line, he wondered to himself, could it all have been a dream? Or was there some truth to what he had seen? And who was that tram? What happened to them? The only thing Percy knew for certain was that when he returned to Farquhar, he would have to have a long talk with Toby.